The Israel-Palestine conflict is a complex and multifaceted issue that can be understood from several perspectives. For some, it is a territorial dispute involving national identities and political rights. For others, particularly Christians, it is a profound spiritual struggle rooted in ancient biblical prophecies and divine promises. Regardless of the viewpoint, this conflict remains one of the most challenging and long-lasting in human history. This article aims to explore the origins of this conflict, tracing it from biblical times to the present day, while highlighting both the spiritual significance and political developments that have shaped this intense rivalry. Through this deep exploration, we hope to help readers draw closer to God by understanding the divine context of these world events and how they align with God's greater plan. The roots of the Israel-Palestine conflict trace back thousands of years to the biblical story of Abraham and his two sons, Isaac and Ishmael. Abraham, considered the patriarch of both Jews and Arabs, received a promise from God that his descendants would inherit the land of Canaan, Genesis 12, verse 1-3. However, the question of which descendant would inherit this promise became the source of division. Abraham had two sons, Ishmael, born to Hagar, an Egyptian servant, and Isaac, born to his wife Sarah in their old age. According to the Bible, God's covenant was to be carried through Isaac and his descendants, making Isaac the father of Jacob, whose descendants became the Israelites, Genesis 17:1, 19-21. This divine promise of land and blessings for Isaac and his descendants forms the basis of the Jewish claim to the land of Israel. Nevertheless, Ishmael also received a blessing from God. In Genesis 16:10-12, God promised that Ishmael would become the ancestor of a great nation. Traditionally, Ishmael's descendants are believed to be the Arab people, which includes the Palestinians. This ancestral split laid the foundation for a conflict where both Jews and Arabs see Abraham as their forefather and view the land of Canaan as part of their inheritance. The core of the Israel-Palestine conflict revolves around claims to the land of Israel, a place that both groups consider their rightful homeland. For the Jewish people, the land is not just a territory, but the realization of a divine promise. The covenant God made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob included the land of Canaan, present-day Israel and Palestine, as an everlasting inheritance for their descendants. Genesis 15:18-21. This promise is reiterated throughout the Old Testament, particularly in God's covenants with Moses and King David. The Bible also speaks of the restoration of Israel in the end times, with prophecies in Ezekiel 37 and Isaiah 66, envisioning a future where Israel is regathered from exile and restored to its land. Many saw these prophecies as being fulfilled in 1948, when Israel became a nation after nearly 2,000 years of exile, following the horrors of the Holocaust. On the other hand, Palestinians, many of whom trace their ancestry to Ishmael and the ancient Canaanites, view the land as their ancestral home. They have lived in the region for centuries, forming a deep connection with it. This dispute over ownership goes beyond politics. It is deeply tied to identity, faith, and historical rights. The establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 is one of the most significant and contentious moments in modern Middle Eastern history. For the Jewish people, it was a moment of triumph, symbolizing the fulfillment of ancient prophecies and the restoration of their homeland. However, for Palestinians, this event marked the beginning of a period of displacement and loss, known as the Nakba, or the catastrophe. To truly understand the impact of 1948, we must delve into the historical, political, and emotional factors that led to the creation of Israel. The origins of the modern conflict between Jews and Arabs in Palestine can be traced back to the late 19th century with the rise of the Zionist movement, founded by Theodor Herzl in 1897. Zionism advocated for the establishment of a Jewish homeland in response to centuries of persecution, including pogroms in Eastern Europe and Russia. At that time, Palestine was under Ottoman rule and was home to a predominantly Arab Muslim population, along with smaller Christian and Jewish communities. However, Zionists viewed Palestine as the historical homeland of the Jewish people, based on biblical promises and historical connections to the land. From the early 1900s, Jewish immigration to Palestine increased. driven by Zionist aspirations and the growing dangers faced by Jews in Europe. This immigration surged further after the Balfour Declaration of 1917, in which the British government expressed its support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. The declaration, while celebrated by Jews, was seen by Arab inhabitants as a betrayal by the British and planted seeds of future conflict. In 1947, in an effort to address the rising violence between Jews and Arabs, the United Nations proposed a partition plan. The plan aimed to create two separate states in Palestine, one Jewish and one Arab, with Jerusalem placed under international administration due to its religious significance to Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. Jewish leaders, led by David Ben-Gurion, accepted the plan with reservations, viewing it as the best opportunity to achieve statehood, even though it did not provide them with control over Jerusalem. The Arab leadership, however, rejected the plan outright, seeing it as a colonial imposition that ignored the rights of the Arab population. On May 14, 1948, as the British mandate ended, David Ben-Gurion declared the establishment of the State of Israel. The following day, armies from 5 neighboring Arab nations, Egypt, Jordan, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, invaded, hoping to crush the nascent state. This marked the beginning of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, known in Israel as the War of Independence and to Palestinians as the Nakba. During the war, more than 700,000 Palestinians were displaced, either fleeing out of fear or being forcibly expelled by Israeli forces. Many Palestinian villages were depopulated and destroyed. These refugees fled to neighboring countries or to areas like the West Bank and Gaza Strip, leading to a refugee crisis that persists today. The Six-Day War of 1967 is another crucial event that reshaped the modern Middle East and deepened the Israel-Palestine conflict. For Israel, the war resulted in a swift, overwhelming victory that expanded its territory significantly. For Palestinians and neighboring Arab states, the war signaled the beginning of a prolonged Israeli occupation of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, Gaza Strip, and the Golan Heights, an enduring source of tension and international concern. The Six-Day War created a new reality. Israel now controlled significant Arab populations in the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem, initiating what is referred to as the Israeli occupation of these territories. This occupation remains one of the most contentious issues in the conflict, as Palestinians in these territories strive for independence and the creation of their own state. The capture of East Jerusalem was particularly symbolic for Israel. For the first time in nearly 2,000 years, the Western Wall, Judaism's holiest site, came under Jewish control. However, for Palestinians and the Arab world, the loss of East Jerusalem was devastating, as the city also houses the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, two of Islam's holiest sites. Jerusalem holds a unique place in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, but its biblical importance is especially profound. It is depicted as the city where God has placed his name and where he will dwell with his people. 2 Chronicles 6:6. Throughout the Bible, Jerusalem is portrayed as the center of God's activity on earth. The book of Zechariah speaks of Jerusalem's future significance in the end times. In Zechariah 12:2-3, God declares that Jerusalem will become a source of conflict and global tension. I am going to make Jerusalem a cup that sends all the surrounding peoples reeling. On that day when all the nations of the earth are gathered against her, I will make Jerusalem an immovable rock for all the nations. For many Christians, the current conflict over Jerusalem is a fulfillment of this prophecy. The Bible also speaks of Jerusalem's role in the final battles of the end times. The book of Revelation and other apocalyptic texts describe a series of conflicts that will culminate in Armageddon, the ultimate confrontation between good and evil. According to these prophecies, Jerusalem will be at the heart of these final battles. At the core of the spiritual perspective of the Israel-Palestine conflict is the covenant God made with Abraham and his descendants. This covenant is not just about the people of Israel, but also about the specific land of Canaan, which God promised as an everlasting inheritance. Genesis 12:1-3. For many Christians, this covenant remains significant, and God's promises are eternal. Thus, the conflict over this land is seen as more than just a political or territorial dispute. It is viewed as an effort to undermine God's covenant and obstruct his divine plan for Israel and the world. Throughout the Old Testament, there are numerous prophecies about the scattering of the Jewish people, their exile, and their eventual restoration to the land, a process that many believe began in the 20th century. The Israel-Palestine conflict is incredibly intricate, involving political, historical, and emotional layers, but it is also deeply spiritual. The biblical context of the land, the divine promises, and the prophecies all point to a greater story, one of God's covenant, his plan for his people, and his ultimate purpose for humanity. As believers, understanding the spiritual significance of this conflict can help us draw closer to God. It reminds us of the power of his promises, the unfolding of his plan, and the need to align our hearts with his purposes. The ongoing conflict over Israel is part of a broader spiritual struggle that has been taking place for millennia. A struggle that ultimately points to God's plan for redemption and restoration. Let us pray for peace in the region, for the fulfillment of God's will, and for the day when he will bring true peace to Jerusalem and to the entire world. May we take this opportunity to deepen our faith, trusting in God's promises and seeking to understand his plan for our lives. As we navigate these complex issues, let us remember that our ultimate hope lies not in earthly resolutions, but in the eternal kingdom of God. What are your thoughts on the Israel-Palestine conflict? Do you view it as primarily a spiritual war, a political struggle, or both? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's discuss these important questions together. Don't forget to subscribe for more insights into how ancient prophecies connect with our modern world and how we can draw closer to God through his word.